Hey guys, Steve here at SKS Props, and today we're going to be making a tech shotgun from the game Cyberpunk 2077. Welcome to the shop. If you're new to the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button because I'm going to be coming back with lots more tips and tricks for prop and costume fabrication. Today's build, we're going to be making a tech shotgun from the upcoming game Cyberpunk 2077. Now this game isn't out yet, so I had to base the weapon off a bunch of still images that I could find online. This video will be a two-parter. Part 1 will be on my channel. It will deal completely with the fabrication process. Part 2 will be over on Punish Props YouTube channel. There, Bill and I will be finishing this thing off and getting it ready for a convention. Now as far as fabrication goes, this is all foam fabrication, so it is con safe. It's extremely light. The entire thing breaks down to go into my luggage so I can take it to conventions around the country. I want to show you guys the steps that it takes to put it together. We got a lot to do, so let's get started. First thing to do was cut out the template that I had created in Photoshop. You can find a download for this over in the description section. Next, I measured out how long the barrels were supposed to be and then cut down some 1-inch PVC pipe. Using sanding sponges to get rid of additional flashing, I test fit the end caps. The end caps are a little bit long, so I'm going to mark where they need to be cut and then cut those down on the bandsaw. The rings that are left over I'm going to keep off to the side because I'm going to use those for the trigger guard later on. Using my disc sander, I'm able to get rid of all the additional Ray's company logos and markings. Using sanding sponges on the PVC pipe will help prep the surface for contact cement. I'm going to be skinning both barrels with 2mm HD foam. This is going to be a better surface for paint and additional foam pieces later on in the build. The foam is rolled out and cut to an approximate shape that will cover the PVC pipes. I'll be using weldwood contact cement for this part of the build. Here I've put some into condiment bottles to make it easier to spread. Using a chip brush, I evenly spread the contact cement all over the foam and the PVC pipe. A line of super glue is put onto the edge of the foam and then the pipe is rolled to evenly distribute the pressure. Any additional flashing will be cut away because the seam will be in between the two barrels. This process is then repeated for the second PVC pipe. A strip of 6mm HD foam is glued in between the two barrels. This will act as a spacer. I'm constantly going back and checking the pieces that I've put together so far with my reference template. Bob Smith superglue is used to adhere a strip of 2mm foam to the top of the two barrels. Here I'm measuring out where 2 strips of 2mm foam will wrap around the barrels. Some 6mm foam is cut down and used to detail around these areas. This specially cut piece of foam was glued into place to make it look as though the barrels were attached at the end. Going back to my template, I'm trying to figure out exactly the size that I need out of some 4mm EVA foam from TNT. This will be used to bulk up the bottom and sides of the barrels. The bottom support structure is glued into place with some contact cement and superglue. The side supports are cut out of 4mm EVA foam and glued into place. It's definitely not easy to get the sides and top of a prop to line up this perfect, but that's the great thing about foam is that it's a very versatile material to work with. Just adding some additional detail pieces with some cut down 6mm HD foam. Now I'm going to start cutting out all the blocks that are going to act as the power coils for this tech shotgun. There's 12 of them all together and they have a ton of little details on there. So the first thing I need to do is cut off all the corners. This will act as the middle of the power cell. Next I cut out blocks of 6mm foam. These are then glued to the 10mm that I cut out previously. On top of all this, I glue on a block of 4mm foam. This is cut slightly larger to give it a lip. An additional layer of 6mm foam is cut out, refined with a rotary tool, and glued on top of the 4mm block. And to finish it off, a small strip of 2mm is glued to the very top. Using googly eyes, super glue, and a steady hand, I attach these faux rivets to the corners of the power cell. The power cell has an additional detail strip at the very bottom. This is cut out of 2mm foam. And same for the small square. Now that's just one of these. Luckily, I can use a little bit of video magic to make the rest appear. Now before we add the power cells on, they have a bunch of wires running underneath of all of them. Lucky for me, all the wires on this gun are all flat, so again I'm using 2mm HD foam. Each of these is cut and glued into place kind of haphazardly. I want it to have an organic feel to it. A strip of 4mm EVA foam is glued to the bottom of the barrels. This is where the hand grip will attach. Small strips of 4mm foam are glued into place. These will act as the rails that the power cells slide on in the game. The hand grip at the bottom of the gun is made out of multiple pieces of 10mm HD foam. I want this thing to be pretty stable because this is what I'm actually going to be holding on to, so after I check it for fit, I add additional walls on the inside. This is then glued into place with some Bob Smith super glue. Strips of 2mm HD foam are glued into place to act as details on the hand grip. A leather punch is used on the foam to simulate small rivets on the bottom of the power cells. You could also use the end of a ballpoint pen. I'm starting to glue on all the power cells to the actual barrel. The big trick here is to make sure that they all line up side to side and top to bottom. An additional strip of 2mm foam is used to detail the very top. To make the sight for this shotgun, I actually use a Q-tip. I just cut off both ends, sandwich it in between the two pieces of foam, and glue it into place. When you're a prop maker, it's all about finding something that works. For the stock of the shotgun, I take my template and transfer that onto some 2-inch thick foam from TNT Cosplay Supply. Now this stuff is very thick and very dense. Really the only way to cut it is on a bandsaw. So here I'm cutting out the general shape, and then I'm going to refine this on the belt sander. Just a quick mock-up to make sure the scale of everything is correct. I use a belt sander to get a gradual curve to the main part of the stock, and then go in with a rotary tool to refine all the edges. And if you take your time, you can see how you can transform a block of foam into something pretty amazing. Now because this weapon has to travel with me to different conventions, I made it so that it could break apart. This was achieved by using a dowel and some rare earth magnets. The metal sections that go on the stock were transferred onto some 2mm HD foam with a ballpoint pen, cut out and glued into place. This little block of 10mm foam helps me hide the seams where the gun breaks apart. Once I ensure that the whole thing test fits together properly, I can start adding on all the additional detail pieces. To start working on the trigger guard, I heat up some PVC pipe and I start bending it to meet the contours of my template. Now because it's not quite thick enough, I glue on a strip of 6mm HD foam and then sand it down to the size that I need. The plate for the bottom of the stock is glued down and the trigger guard is glued into place. Some 6mm foam is cut and glued to act as the trigger. I start working on the electrical box on the side of the gun. This is cut from a block of the foam that I had cut earlier and then wrapped with 2mm HD foam. And then I draw on the gun where this needs to line up. Now because the gun needs to break apart, this piece cannot be glued permanently. So I'm going to use some rare earth magnets. These little magnets are pretty inexpensive and very easy to come by. They work great for a lot of different prop and cosplay needs. More strips of 2mm foam are starting to be cut out. These are going to act as the additional lines that will run from the gun to the power box. These are all measured out, cut to fit, and then glued onto the barrel. Once they wrap around to the other side, I glue on an additional strip of 2mm foam. This will act as a port that will glue onto the back of the power box. And the same thing is done for the wires that are on this side of the gun. All 8 wires are then glued onto the back of the power box. You can see how the rare earth magnet works great for this application. 10mm foam round dowels are cut out, detailed, and glued onto the hand grip. These are drilled out and electrical lines are twisted into the foam. These lines also run to the power box attached to the side of the gun. Fabrication of this tech shotgun is pretty much complete. I'm really happy with how it turned out. There was a lot of parts in this thing, but it looks great. Something I really wanted to do on this build was achieve a unique texture by using Plasti-Dip. This is a technique that I'm going to show you guys in video part 2. So you guys can see what it takes to put together a tech shotgun from Cyberpunk 2077. Now remember, this is just part 1. Part 2 will be over on Punish Props YouTube channel. I will have a link in the description. There, Bill and I will be finishing this thing off and getting it ready for Emerald City Comic Con. Now if you guys are using HD foam, or if you are building any of my builds, feel free to tag me on Twitter and Instagram at SKSProps, because I would love to see your progress. If you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe, and be sure to swing back by again for more tips and tutorials. Until then, thanks for stopping by.